putting a midship camera in our buses as long as it is in the curvature of the cabin or flush mount is allowable. Otherwise, they would have said no, and we would have had to put a rear camera facing forward, the front camera, and the driver camera. So what we're going to do is with these high backs, the camera in midship will be coming down more than over the top of the seats, so you'll be able to view the midship back a lot better and get more detail for the principals when they're working with the discipline. And that's our primary reason, is for discipline and security of the students on the buses. So what we would like to see is having at least have one camera in any 6-passenger vans, 2 cameras in the 9-passenger vans. It could one would actually be satisfactory, and this would lower what we're doing here. The 10 to 30 passenger vehicles would have 2 cameras in, and the 48 or larger, any bus that's 48 passenger or larger, I would recommend a 3-camera system. Again, these are the totals. The single camera system would cost us $42,000 plus some change. The 2-camera system would be about $63,500, and the 3-camera system in all the larger buses and the vans and stuff would have 1, and the minibuses 2 would be about $84,500. Again, going to the 3-camera system will assist us in the security of the students, helping with discipline for the principals, and the main reason is the seat back in 2009, they were raised up by the federal government, which entailed the state to force the state to raise it also. The minimum height is 24, but some buses are coming through with the newer seat backs, which are now 29 inches. So if you figure from where you're sitting, that seat goes up 29 inches, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade students, you're not going to see them, regardless of how many cameras you put in there, unless there's one almost on top of every seat. Again, also, all of them will be capable of audio and visual. We do record what's being conversations, depending on how loud the kids are and how much you're going to really hear, but you do hear the driver, you do hear what's going on for the most part throughout the bus. All this equipment is listed under the CoStar's contracts, which are pre-bid contracts throughout the country in Pennsylvania, and it would not require advertising or anything for these. We could just go right out and purchase them at any time. The contract number is listed there. It's on all of our invoices or that we've received as far as letting us know what they can get us in cost. This is a snapshot view. It's not from ours, but this is a snapshot view, what I see when I'm viewing cameras. Right now, the lower left one is the one that I see, because that's all we record, and that's the only camera that we have in the buses. The one right there where you see the driver, we would position it a little bit forward more and angle it out a little bit more so we capture the front 2 seats. We can do that in our positioning of these cameras. The rear one on the upper left is not one that we were looking at yet. That's one that shoots down and as you see, it captures the back 4 seats really well, that you can see all activities that would be in there. And the lower right, that is a front setting that some school districts use and contractors to capture what's going on in front of the bus when watching the students as they cross in front. There are a lot of other camera type things you can do to buses. You can put a side mount one that's on the outside to capture people that are passing our buses. When the red lights are on, it's only activated when the lights come on and only records then. So we would have some assistance in turning them into the police for the violation. Our systems are capable of 4 cameras, so that in the future, if we would want to go to more cameras and put one in the rear of the bus and the other 3 that we were talking about, we could do that, or we could go with a front-mounted one, showing the outside front of the bus. But right now, my recommendation would be to go to the the 3-camera system, costing about $84,000.
And I should point out that when we met Mr. Geiger, Mr. Galbert, you and I, we all agreed that that's the way to go. Even though it's the most expensive, we think we get the biggest bang for our buck. And we also have some savings because the gas prices were so low this year.
Right.
You said about $70,000.
We're looking at maybe $70,000 in funds that we should be able to capture right out of my budget, out of the fuel this year. So that would pay for the biggest chunk of that.
When would they be able to be installed?
As fast as the mechanics can get them in, but it would take some time. Just to understand, they have to do the rest of the work of keeping the fleet moving too. And Carl said that they would work on them as fast as they can. Our first priority would be to put them in any buses that don't have cameras. Then we move to updating the ones that have the old hard drives, and then we would work over as the summer goes to getting them into everything and going with the system. We would hope to have them accomplished and everything done by the start of school.
The buses that already have the cameras, they're single cameras, so
Right.
would those be repositioned then?
The single one would stay where it is, and we would add 2 other cameras.
Okay.
And that's why, we're going to buy all 3-camera systems. Now I'm going to go backwards here a little. If you look at the top line there, it says a 3-camera system would cost us $1,030 or $1,079. Okay, and a single camera costs us $195. Now, in a 2-camera system, it's $970. So the cost of that 3rd camera, if you buy the complete system, is less than the cost of a single camera. So if we buy all 3-camera systems, even though some are only going to have a single camera, those cameras can be used in other systems, and we just have to put them in the ones that have one already in. It saves us about $75 on each camera.
On a set.
On us buying the full 3-camera system.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Is it, oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering if there are 3-camera system, do they work together, and do they have one card for all 3 of them that you see?
We have, it has one recorder, which is in a lockbox that drivers or anyone else cannot get into. The mechanics and I have keys that we can get into to pull the SIM card out. The SIM card is a 32 gig right now. We would upgrade to a 64 gig so we can capture more. We do actually capture on the current system over a month of recording. So it does capture quite a bit. It will capture less with 3 cameras. That's why we're going to look to go to the 64 gig memory cards.
So the 3 cameras, it all goes onto the one card?
Yes. Yes, and I can pull all 3 cameras up and look at them at a time. And then if I choose that the camera 1 would be the one I want to see, I can click on that and the whole thing goes to just that camera then.
Okay, so but you can see them simultaneously, like in that
Yes.
picture?
Yes.
So if you wanted to try and see the same event from 3 different angles?
Right, exactly. And then what happens is once I identify the problem that the principal's looking for, I can save it. It's downloaded to a shared drive that's available to the principals by building, and I put an identification code in, which bus number, PM, AM, and the date. They can just go in from their computer then, and they can view that portion that they needed to see for the disciplinary thing.
Okay, and the cameras that are already on the buses, the single cameras, it's the same system that you're
Yes,
buying?
exactly the same. We are able to purchase these through CoStars, through Wolfington Body, where we get our current cameras from.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are there other systems where you can, where they're sent and you can actually record and see all of them live?
At one time?
Yes.
No, not
There's
currently.
nothing that you can do?
Not for the school buses.
The top left picture, you said that that's not the one that we would be getting, because that's the back, but is that basically what it would look like in the center?
It'll pan out a little bit more and it'll capture more than just those couple seats. It depends on the angle. That one's angled straight down, that camera, and that's why it's only capturing those 4. If we had a true one in the back and it's angled properly, you'd see the whole bus from back to front. Also, the one that we're going to put in midship won't be exactly in the middle, it'll be towards the back a little bit, and it'll capture from the middle angle so that it captures from the mid part of the bus all the way to the back, and we'll get a good picture there too.
I guess my concern is if there's, I'd like to see what that looks like. I don't know if there's a way of seeing what that angle would look like.
We won't even know what it looks like
Until
until
we
we
put it
put
in?
one in there. We can actually position it. We sit there with a computer monitor, and that's how we position them, so we get capturing. It's not just stuck up there, you know, and then hope it captures. They actually sit there with a laptop and position it before it's permanently put in place.
Because looking at that top left picture, depending on if you have a female student sitting in there.
Yeah,
and
that's
what
why I
she's
wouldn't
wearing,
like it that
that's-
way.
Exactly, so that's my
Yes.
concern in seeing that angle.
No, Carl, I just put this up here because this is what was on the company's website, and I was hoping to have a better picture of the rear towards the front, that it would be looking more across, not just straight down. And I see your point on that it is intrusive if you put that there to the females. But no, rest assured, we won't be doing it at that angle.
So the SIM cards are in a lockbox, but the
Yeah,
cameras.
the SIM card is in a lockbox. The wiring for the cameras is behind the metal sheeting as best it can be. Yes.
So no one can turn the camera off.
No cameras can be turned off unless they cut a wire that's exposed, yes.
But you could put something over the lens.
And yes, and then in the past where I worked before, a driver did, and that driver, that is a violation of tampering with technology within the district and is grounds for termination. And that person had been terminated in where I worked before for that reason.
How often do you review?
There'll
We-
be questions at the end of the meeting.
Sure.
So if anyone
Joe has some
else
questions,
has questions up here, we'll have comment
Joe
at
has
the
some.
end. Any other questions?
Yeah, what
For
y'all
Mr.
think?
Geiger?
Mr. Geiger,
Yes.
are these, since we're purchasing the new buses, are they something that could be taken out of buses and put into the new ones? Or
Yes.
is it- Okay.
Yeah, we remove the camera systems out of any buses that are traded in, and those are put into additional newer buses than or anything else, yes. We also know that there is a buyer out there, that these systems will go out on public surplus, and they've already been in touch with us because they know that Wolf told them that we're looking to sell. It's a district in Texas that wants to buy them.
And you said the bulk of the 84,000 should come from your fuel savings?
Yes, I'm estimating at least 75% or more will come out of fuel savings this year.
And the balance of that?
Thanks,
Very
Sean.
generous.
I'm sure there'll be maybe other portions in the budget in mine alone, but I think there was money left over from the purchase of the buses that we didn't utilize. We could use also.
So is the plan, do we need to vote on this at the next board meeting, and then they'll be purchased in the current year's budget?
We want to move it to the February meeting. Everybody agree?
Oh, no, I don't know, sorry. I was just wondering, is that, I don't know if you guys already discussed a plan for reviewing them, or is that something that we'll be discussing and coming up with, like, you know, the policy for, you know, how often these are going to be reviewed and...
Currently, the only time we view them is when they're in the garage to make sure that they're working. And if we get a driver that writes up students, then the cards are pulled, given to me or my assistant, and we view them, download it for the principals, and then they get to watch them. We don't view them every, you know, because if you want us to view every tape every week, you need at least one more person in the office to do that, because I don't have enough time to do that.
And I understand that, and I agree, but I guess if what we're doing, if we're doing this for the safety perspective, I think it's important that we come up with some kind of, you know, where we're randomly screening, we're randomly pulling them and randomly checking them, because if there's not an expectation that these are going to be randomly checked, you know, then they're going to think, well, as long as I don't report anything, the cameras aren't going to be watched.
Well, you have to understand, every bus in this district is, in a day, runs anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. That would be my whole shift, just to do one bus, if I want to watch that. Like I said, if you want something like that done, we would have to hire more people
Right.
to do it. Because that is not enough, there's not enough time in the day now to do what we have to do sometimes.
Okay, so we'll move that to the February agenda. Okay, the next item is discussion regarding ground level ventilation system for the high school pool. Mr. Alonso?
Thank you. So you may be aware that there have been some air quality issues at the pool. It seems to come and go, weather related. Some years they get a little stronger than others, but this year particularly, again, with a warm fall, winter, the complaints seem to have come pretty heavy. So looking into it, you know, in-house we have 2 certified members on the staff that take water samples. They must record it daily. Also weekly, we take, out-of-house comes in and takes water samples, and that gets delivered to the Department of Health. So after hearing about the problems, we first looked at the records. Our pool pH, our chlorines are very good. So knowing that, then we looked into the unit ventilating system. I had my tech look into it, and it's operating as designed. Excuse me. At that point, I asked my tech to deliver like 10% more of outside air at all the times. It didn't really help very much when there was a lot of activity in the pool. Towards the end of the day, we were finding a lot of irritants, a lot of vapors coming up. So I reached out to our environmental group just to test the air. We had the air quality test. The samples came back negative, well below standard. Also, in talking to my environmental consultants, you know, what do you know about this situation? So they kind of came back and said, you know, if you have a lot of people going into the pool that aren't bathing first, you have, you know, the hair dyes, the deodorant, the makeup, the gels in the hair, and the combination of urine with chlorine, it just, you know, becomes, guess what they call chloramines? Is that correct, Doctor?
Chloramines.
Chloramines. What that is, you know, it just starts bubbling off the water and it likes to lay low right on the water surface. Now, the more you splash in activities, the more it goes into the air. The way the pool was built is as a very high return air system. It's to take out the heat, bring in either cool or warm air, keep that circulating. So I reached out to the original pool designer of this pool, who knows it well, and says they're having the exact same problems at 2 other pools. And he agreed with, you know, why this is happening. You have a little chemistry lab going on in your pool with adding all the other ingredients besides that. So they're working, and they've developed a way to repair this. So we're looking to ask them to get involved in our capital improvement plan for 2017. We already had UV to be put into the pool, which will also help fight that's in the water. It won't fight it once it gets into the air, but it will help clean the water in our filtration system. So we already had that in our capital plan to have that put in next summer. We want to move that forward for this year, for immediate. We want to investigate, have Dewey put the bid documents together for this low ventilation exhaust return system. And then I would also like to add to that an alternate bid while we're going out to have the pool drained, acid wash, cleaned, and refilled. Every 5 years that they ask that a pool that size does get drained and refilled. I did it about 5 years ago, so it's time again. There's a certain period of time where you just can't re-nourish that water proper, so it's time to drain it, acid wash it, it is stained, get it cleaned up, ventilation system, UV system, and by next September, have a good pool again. So we will be looking at the next board meeting to approve to go out to bid for that item also, to add on to our already this year's capital improvement projects.
That portion portion of it, what's the estimated cost on that?
We really don't have an estimated cost till we investigate, so we need permission to investigate first. And that's what we'll really be approving for, to go out and investigate the cost of this price and come back with an estimated cost.
For everything?
For
you're saying?
everything.
For
And
everything.
we'll break it down into, we already have an estimated cost for the UD, I believe it's in our capital book already for 45,000. So we already have that cost for that,
Okay,
because that was already on the books.
okay. Any questions?
You have to replace the UV lights from time to time. Do you know what that cost will be, the ongoing maintenance cost?
I do not, it's new to me, the UV. So we'll bring that back.
I mean, it obviously depends on the volume that you're treating,
Right.
how frequently you do that, but often it's 6 to 9 months.
6 to 9 months, yeah. So there'll be some savings in, I believe, the chlorine usage. I believe you're going to use less chemicals to treat the pool with that system.
I know you said the ventilation system is working properly, but that they're having these problems in several other pools, the company that you talked to, and they're the ones who installed or recommended that system. I'm just wondering, if this is a flaw on their side that they should be covering because, shouldn't it have worked appropriately the way that it was designed in the first place?
Well, where they're replacing it, I don't know if they designed that system. I don't know that. I know they designed our system. And I don't think you can go back 10 years and say, well, this was a flaw in your design. 2 years ago, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I don't think we had this problem. I think it's more has to do with children not bathing. It has a lot to do with our pool being overused. Our pool never gets a break. And they said it's one thing a pool needs. It needs a break. I can go there first thing in the morning, and it's actually really good. You go to the end of the day, it just doesn't get a break. From 6 a.m. till 9:30 at night, that pool's used. It needs to have a break. And since we're not giving it that break, it's creating that problem too.
What's the time frame then for getting it installed? Because you said, so we're going to vote to give approval to investigate, and then, I mean, is there enough time to get everything done before the summer comes when you would need to do the work?
If we vote at the board meeting to move ahead, we more than likely will have enough time to start as soon as summer is and be up and running before school starts. So end of June and running before school starts.
Okay, and so we would need, so in February, we would vote to give the permission to go out and investigate, and then you would come back with prices for us to approve.
Estimated cost,
Okay, and then we would have to go out to
and
bid?
then we'll
or-
go out to bid, right?
So then there'd be 3 votes? Or no? 2?
Well, I don't know that we need a vote for the estimated cost. If you're, it depends on what you want to do. If you're giving us the okay to go out and investigate, right there you're spending most of your money, because there's a lot of time involved to investigate this and start the design process to be able to come back to you with a good estimated price. We've spent a lot of time and money to get that far. At that point, we would probably just go out to bid and then come back with bid results. We may update you what we know of the costs along the way, but
You said part of the problem too is that we're not giving it enough of a break. Should we, is that something that we should be considering too? Scheduling a break so that this isn't happening too?
well, I think so, but good luck. I can't even get in there to work. The holiday was used, Martin Luther King was used. I cannot get in there to work.
Jeff, how long have you been dealing with this? How long ago did it start? You said, school's been going about
This
10
year,
years.
or just years ago, you mean?
How many years ago? Does it seem to be escalating too?
It does seem to be. Did I hear about it 6 years ago? I don't think so. 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. It seems to be weather related.
Okay.
Shoulder season when we're not really heating or cooling, even though the ventilation always runs 24/7. So it seems to be weather related. This fall, it started right into the winter. To be honest with you, I haven't heard anything in the last 3 weeks
When it's been so cold?
when it's been so cold. Now it'll come back in the spring, but it's every year it's getting a little more and more.
So we'll send it to We've sent this to the meeting.
Those are the motion.
Everybody agrees? Okay. Sean?
The motion for this, are we looking for a motion to design specifications and go out to bid, basically?
Yeah, we are.
That's how,
That's how it would read.
that would be the pleasure of the board, if that's.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay. All right. We'll move on to item number 4, which is to discuss the weight room floor. Mr. Babb, did you want to talk about these?
We looked at the weight room floor up at Hellman Field, and we'd like to put a rubberized floor in there to lift weights safely. We did get some quotes from companies. We sent out 5 to different companies, and we got some quotes. We'd like to go with looking at 3 companies in particular that are with co-stars, and we'd like to bring in samples for the facilities director of the board to look at. And we'd like to have permission to move ahead with this. The big question is, where are we going to fund this? And that's where we're at as far as the weight room floor.
I'm not sure. I have information. I don't know if you want to share. There were Mr. Babb said 5 came in. There were obviously you have the one on the high end, one on the low end, and this was discussed a bit during the ad hoc meeting in regard to this floor, and then putting equipment into the weight room, which this is the first step, that you need a floor in there before you're going to put equipment on your concrete floor. Do you want to just real quick go over the prices on the 3 that you're proposing?
Yeah, the lowest on the 3 we're proposing is $10,878. And then it ranges on up to 16. $16,710.
Why don't we have it on the portal? I'm not sure when did these come in.
This information just came in to Mr. Babb in the last 24 hours, 2 days. So we've been gathering this, put the request out to the companies. Information's just been coming in, so.
Can you speak up, please?
What?
May you speak up? I can't hear you.
The previous one that was brought, and it was the only one at the time, which was for Sorinex, was 19.9. So that one's not being considered. The low end was 98.68, and there were several things on there that they gave that dollar amount, 98.68, but it in the quote it stated there's several things that are not included, so you could anticipate that price is going to go higher. So that brings us back with these 3 here. Like Mr. Babb said, the question posed previously was in regard to funding for these, which we thought we were at a $20,000 threshold before. So now we're looking between roughly $11,000 and $16,800. Mr. Daubert, do you want to talk about the credits that came back on the field project?
Okay. The Hellman Field project, we had 4 credits which came back from our contractors, which totaled $62,718. Those dollars were set aside for the Hellman Field project and are now back into the capital projects fund, waiting to be used for something else.
Because some of the discussion, Mrs. Yardley, you were there, I believe, Mrs. Comm, Mrs. Banas Clemens, that were at ad hoc, because the discussion at the time was how to fund this. So we have the 62 in allowances, which was
So you're saying it's in the, that's going back into our general fund,
No,
because
that
our
goes
capital fund, I'm
back
sorry.
into capital, so that
But that could
was-
be used for any capital
It
expense.
can, it was allowances that came back off of the Hellman Field.
What was the number, what was the
Project.
number for how much was raised specifically from, that came in so far?
For the fundraising?
Not through the fundraising in general, but through Coach Hollenbach's fundraising. A certain percentage had come in already. Wasn't that like 15,000?
Yeah, it's actual cash on hand is $15,681. And there are commitments for, I believe we saw
60.
up to about
Around
that
$60,000.
$60,000 mark. But actual cash on hand, I think is what you're asking me, it's 15.6.
I guess from my perspective then, I mean, we have to decide, his proposal at the ad hoc committee meeting was for his fundraising to fund the weight room. And if that is the case, and that's what the board decides to do, then I would think, you know, they would have to decide whether that's the money that you would want to use for the floor, and then as more money comes in, they could put that towards the rest of the weightlifting equipment, if that's what they want to do. I wouldn't personally be in favor of using, you know, our capital fund for that, but if that was their purpose for the fundraising and they went out and did that, and they have enough for that, I wouldn't be opposed to them using their fundraising towards that. But I mean, I wouldn't really be in favor of using the general fundraising money towards that, but if that's their specific purpose, and that already exceeds that amount, I think that that part would be fair.
I thought the family really had wanted the money to go towards the equipment, and then they were requesting that we would do the floor. Something else that had come up at the other meeting was that, you know, within this whole stadium project, it would include the weight room, and it would make sense to include the floor of a room that you're putting with the stadium. So this money that came back, in my mind, I'm not sure. I don't understand why it couldn't be used as part of that overall project.
I mean, initially, you know, the floor, it's how you look at it. Is it equipment, is it not? You know, you can look at it and say, should it have been part of the project to put flooring in there, regardless of, you know, if money's being raised to put equipment in there. At the time when it was approved, it wasn't decided how the equipment was going to be paid for in that room. It wasn't through the donation process at that point. The money being raised wasn't by the Hollenbach family wasn't designated for equipment then.
Right.
So, you know, I think the point is too that we have 62,000 that came back in allowances. We're looking at between 11 and say 17,000 here to put flooring in to be able to then utilize this room, which is right now sitting empty.
I guess my understanding from that meeting was that the flooring was included in what he was talking about doing, because you know, we had discussed having people maybe sponsor different items, and he said that, yeah, but the flooring isn't really a glamorous thing that people want to put their name on. So
Yeah,
that was my,
He
okay.
pulled that out. He
That's an
said,
example.
we're
But
going to do
I think
the,
the discussion, you know, like I said, you know, right now is, do we want to consider using this, part of these allowances that came back as, back into the capital fund as part of this project initially that we have here to put this floor in?
I guess my personal opinion is that the money that came back in should be going towards funding the expenses we already paid for, not funding additional expenses we haven't paid for. My personal opinion would be moving that money, if Mr. Hollenbach agrees, moving that money that he specifically raised towards it. That would be what I would be in favor of. I wouldn't be in favor of anything else, but I'm only one person, so it's up to the rest of the board.
I just think of, when I think of building a room, it typically includes a floor. I mean, I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think if it was,
Yeah.
if you're building the thing and it was called a weight room, then a weight room includes a certain kind of floor. Just like if you're building a classroom includes, a tile floor. So I'm not sure how that, was it an oversight that it wasn't specifically listed, that it would include flooring? I don't know. Maybe it was something obvious that, of course, it's going to include a floor. To me, it would have been an obvious thing. But, and I don't think when Mr. Hollenbach was here, I wish he was here tonight, because I think that what he had presented to his family was the equipment, and the equipment was not including the floor. But again, he's not here, so I don't want to put words.
And if that's not the case, I think that there's, I think that there's other opportunities out there to fundraise to pay for this without taking it out of our capital fund. I think that there's plenty of other opportunities, that I'd be willing to help with to work on fundraising, additionally to get that or getting it sponsored. And I think that since that's something that we have not yet paid for, I think it's easier to get people on board for fundraising for things that we haven't paid for yet rather than things we already have. So I think that that's a good opportunity to go and try to do that.
Well, then you go back to the question of what was raised at the fundraising committee, that there's $29,000 aside from correct? From what was raised, taking out the Hollenbach donations. So off of the Rams on the Ridge capital campaign, we have 29,000 there.
I guess when we say, well, yeah,
So, and at the same time, I hear what you're saying, but we have a room sitting up there that is empty, that we've paid for, that we're heating, that our students are not being able to use.
and that's why I think that moving that money from Mr. Hollenbach would be a solution.
Fundraising over next how many years for just the floor portion, which I agree with what Mrs. Collins is saying. The floor should have been part of the project. It was an oversight, obviously, at the time, you could call it that, to not include a floor, so.
I think we could continue to say, well, this is an oversight, but if you look at the original proposal and say, well, we changed our minds, we're adding this, we changed our minds, we added this, we changed our minds, we're adding this, and now, okay, well, we actually missed this, so let's throw this one in there. I just think we can keep doing that, or we can find a stopping point and look for a solution for individual things. That's just, look, that's my perspective, and obviously there's a lot of people here who can vote differently.
Any other comments?
I have a question. What's the deciding factor on the floor? If you have 3 out of the 5 that you think are good quotes, what's the difference and what's the deciding factor?
They're very similar. They're recycled rubber floor. They have a little bit of a colored fleck in it to kind of hide the dirt, maybe give a little bit of a eye appeal. They're all about 8 millimeter to 9 millimeter of a cushion. They're very similar. The biggest difference, I guess, would be for you guys to take a look at them, feel them. Mr. Loeffler in his experience with flooring, just take a look and see how well he would think they would hold up. They've been used in all kinds of weight rooms, from Villanova University to one sample. Webster Fitness is used throughout Pennsylvania in high schools. So they're very similar products. Basically it comes down to price, how much you want to pay a little bit more for one over another.
And you would be able to get samples for yourself, Mr. Loeffler,
Right.
to look at, to determine if, in hand, there is a difference between these 3. I mean, on paper right now, we're just seeing a difference in dollars. And you're told that they're all comparable, but to see them, to actually see them, to determine that.
So what's the rule for a quote? If it's under a certain amount, then you can just get several quotes, and then the board can pick.
Are they all
any one.
co-stores?
The rules are under 19.4, you need 3 quotes. Over 19.4, you need a public advertised bid. But since these are on CoStars, those requirements are already taken care of by the state.
I have a side question. You said we're heating that room. If we're not using that room, why are we heating it?
Because you have plumbing up there.
Yeah, but can't we winterize it so that we don't have to heat it? If we're not using that, why are we paying to heat it?
You have to have Mr. Lockwood.
Yeah. We're keeping the temps just above freezing, so.
Could we just winterize it instead until it's usable?
No, it wasn't built that way to drain all the water out of it and winterize it.
Okay.
Plus, you wouldn't want a frozen building up there and then bring it back to life. You know, it's not a garage, it's a real building with the cooking equipment that's up there and that sort of thing. But we're keeping the temperatures way down. If somebody would go up there without letting us know that they wanted to use it, they're gonna be very cold because they have to let me know to be able to turn the heat on.
So is there, you said the $29,000, that's pulling out his 15,
That's currently in hand, yes.
so it's 29.
Well,
So
and-
isn't it just a question of we have $29,000 here, or we have 60,000 that came back?
You know,
Or, yeah, 62 that came back.
We had 62,000 in allowances that came back from the project itself. We have $45,000 in the various fundraising accounts, other than the War Memorial. That's not included. So, and of that 45,000, 15,600 is this specific Hollenbach donation that we're talking about.
So we're going to exclude the Hollenbach part, but we're not excluding what First Savings put towards the scoreboard or any of those other things that were put in. I just don't know where we're picking and choosing which ones we're excluding and which ones we're not, that are getting designated and which ones aren't getting designated.
Well, I think that, like Mr. Ferry had explained, it's not, when you give the money, you're not actually buying that thing. You're not buying the scoreboard, you're buying the ad, that ad space. So obviously an ad on the scoreboard is going to get looked at all evening long, so that's worth $4,000 or whatever it was worth. $40,000. Yeah, 4 would be a bargain. So that's worth $40,000. So it's not, we didn't say to whoever, it was a bank that bought that ad space. We weren't saying you're buying a scoreboard for $40,000. You're buying the ad space that is there. That's just your, the location of the ad that your money, that's the value of your ad. So we're not really taking money from people and saying you're buying this computer and then buying the microphone instead. It's not that. That's not the case.
I guess my understanding is that would still be going towards reimbursing us for the money we've already spent, not money then we go and spend afterwards. That's just, I'm done, sorry.
Well, actually, my question was going to be, I think we have 2 groups of money available. So I think, is it just a question of which one do we want to use?
The question is, do we want this to go to the February meeting to vote to put this floor in? But yes, we have to decide where the funds will come from as well. Either the capital fund, which has the allowances, or out of the fundraising that has been brought in.
My question also relates to the timeline. I mean, well, first, I guess I have 2 questions. Will the room be usable with just a floor, with no weight equipment?
Not really. I mean, you could go in there and do some speed training, in inclement weather, but that's about it.
Okay, and then the other question is, I mean, I think the board has to decide and vote if we're going to move forward with the weight equipment with a commitment for $60,000 with only part of the money there. So, I mean, I think that, doesn't the board need to vote on that and the weight equipment also for that?
Yes.
So, I mean, wouldn't it be better to do everything at once and not just get a floor and then a month later say, you know what, we're not getting the weight equipment because there's not enough money there? I mean, just to have the board vote on both of them.
When we had it come to this meeting, it was because the floor was the smaller piece to discuss. At that time too, I believe Sorinex was the only bid that we had on the equipment, which we were then told not on co-stars. So,
Correct. Yeah, they're not on co-stars.
okay. So it's my understanding that there's equipment that is on co-stars that we can look at.
Correct.
So that's comparable to what Sorinex's bid was. So, because at that time we were discussing a possible bid process.
I think it should all be done together. Why put a floor in when we don't have weight equipment to put there?
Mr. O'Donnell?
I think that sounds logical, Mrs. Yardley. I don't want to necessarily put the cart before the horse. And in terms of they're all comparable, what are warranties, what are life expectancies, the floor, what would be the maintenance on all of, I think all of those questions I'd like to have answered before I want to say we want to put dollars down, because those particulars from 11,000 to 16,800, there's a big jump there. And I want to know more particulars regarding the floors. So I'm in agreement with Mrs. Yardley that I feel I would prefer to have everything done at once if we're going to go forward with it. I don't think it's one that I'd like to put a floor in and necessarily now we have a room with a floor that sits empty.
Do we want it to go to the next meeting, which is February 29th? Have that information brought regarding the floor and the equipment?
I'd say yes.
And can we add something about the other money that he has promised? Is it possible to go back? We're getting to this last time, to have it be more of a,
Well, I think
like
that's
a
something
contract
that
or-
we would revisit at the ad hoc meeting.
Okay.
Do you agree, Mrs. Yardley, as far as the commitment, the money that's committed, the follow-up? That's,
I mean, I think if we're discussing it at the facilities meeting about the purchase of it, I mean, I think it could be discussed
Discussed
at the
there.
same meeting.
no, I agree, as far as the collection.
Right, but you're asking if there should be a contract then?
I know it's kind of going backwards that they didn't have it set up, but if you're going to commit to doing it, and obviously the equipment, we can't start buying equipment and then have these people forget to pay, or, so I think I would like to see a system where
Because
they're
we're incurring the expense.
being reminded and have some kind of true commitment in writing that they're going to provide this money.
Yeah, so I mean, if we can have it at the facility, since it relates to a facility, or if we need, I mean, that probably makes more sense just to
Just
discuss
combine
everything
at
at
the
once.
February 29th one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were agreed, we'll move that, just to discuss it there, the floor and the equipment. And Mr. Babb, would we have more information on the comparable vendors from CoStars for that meeting? And when you get, if that could be, I guess, forwarded to Mr. Daubert, and he can forward that out to the board. And in the meantime, can we send these, what we have, the floor quotes out to the rest of the board?
On that one quote, one of them has a lot of information. The one from Webster's has, a good deal of information. But then the one from BSN Sports is really, there's not a lot there. So as far as knowing what the warranties would be, like Mr. Regomo said, and the maintenance of it, there's not a lot of description on BNS. And the one from, really the only one that gave you, more than the basics is Webster's. So the other two, I think if you could get them to break that down, that'd be good.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment.
Could Mr. Babb stay so that if we need to ask him questions, he'll be available?
Attorney Hannah, Youngstown Township. On that $62,000 that has come back in allowances for Hellman Field, there was discussion during the fall regarding the ambulance and back gate entrance and the condition it was left in at the conclusion of the project, that it was all in gravel. And it was my understanding there was discussion that in the plan that should have been paved. Was that ever paved? Is it going to be paved?
I don't believe so, and that falls under impervious surface, correct?
If we were going to put a third ticket booth in, then that whole area was going to be brought up to standards, graded, paved. When we found out the cost that was involved, it was no longer part of the project, so that was removed from the project early on.
Thank you.
Just as a side note, that means basically that prevents the field from being used effectively as a marching band competition field. You do not have an entrance and an exit, so you cannot pull two bands on and off the field at the same time. You only have one gate that allows for a band to enter, just as a side note for future planning. So when people say, why does the spectrum happen? It's not that easy to pull off when you don't have a place to pull 150 kids through safely. Second, I appreciate the concept, but my concern as a parent has nothing to do with discipline. I'm glad that we feel the need to look at tapes for discipline, but to not have a policy, a procedure, I don't care about a policy or procedure. What I care about is real world. For you not to have a process in place that spot checks tape is beyond my comprehension in this day and age. With security concerns this district has been faced with, this is not the first time down the rodeo here, people. We had a girl last year assaulted in this building. And since that time, we haven't come up with a way. We don't think it's important to look at something we are capturing. I mean, I understand the concept. Everyone's going to say it. Every school district has these problems. Every place has these problems. It's what you do to minimize the risk. We're doing nothing. So when you talk about spending $100,000 plus in security, and you won't even talk about what you're going to do, but what you do have in-house you aren't even using, and you have no intention of it, how are people supposed to feel safe sending their kids here? I have a question. Do the cameras outside the building work? Does anybody ever look at that tape? How long is that tape kept? Anyone? Anyone know that answer? Anyone care to know that answer? Because I'm horrified when I open up the newspaper and I read a story about a bus driver who's been doing this to special needs kids for years on end. That's completely avoidable. Just the same as we have absolutely no internet protocol policy for our staff. None. You have staff all over the place who spend their nights and their weekends on Facebook and video games and everything else with these kids. Nobody ever checks. You can't tell me you even know in this building when your Wi-Fi does and doesn't let your employees on.
You missed the policy portion, but the policy that we discussed earlier is beginning to address that.
I understand that, but you also have existing technology you
I
don't
understand.
have.
I'm just letting you know that, we.
And I
the
appreciate
policy
it.
that's
Yep.
coming is meant to address exactly that.
Because the other thing that concerns me is you have a Wi-Fi network in this district. You have absolutely no security protocols. You block service to certain websites for students. You don't block it for teachers.
And you don't know what your teachers are accessing while they are here. I fired an employee 2 years ago. Why? Because after 1 week of him fooling around and watching XXX videos on a work-related computer, I knew it. You guys have no way to know this stuff.
Thank you. It's public comment. Anybody else?
Robert Linden, West Rock Hill Township. I had some questions for Mr. Laufers on the swimming pool. The UV system, is that a disinfection system? Is that going to supplement or replace the chlorination system?
It's just going to supplement it. It doesn't replace it.
So how do you know it's effective?
Because all of the readings say it is, all the schools are going towards it. It reduces the chlorine that you do use and the acid and the pH. It helps reduce the chemicals that we're using already.
Well, my company sold UV systems, and I don't recall that it had anything to do with pH. It's simply a matter of chlorine.
Chlorine. It helps with the chemicals. The
So
chlorine.
how do you sample your chlorine residuals? Do you sample free and total?
I don't sample it myself, so I can't answer that. I have 2 certified guys on staff that sample it.
So they just take a sample out of the pool?
Correct.
You don't have continuous sampling?
We have continuous monitoring for chlorine, and that it will be a self-feeder if chlorine's needed, but we don't have a self-sampler, no.
Well, you have continuous sampling for chlorine residual, total residual, free residual?
As far as refilling or
No, I
for
mean-
sample testing?
Testing?
No. Same.
What about pH testing? Is that continuous or just random?
Well, what do you mean continuous, like?
Well, you take a sample from the pool continuously and monitor what the pH is.
No. We take samples twice a day.
So they come out of the scum gutter, or you take them out of the center of the pool, the bottom of the pool, the top of the pool?
They take them out of the pool where they were trained.
Well, having experience with public swimming pools and health departments, I've seen them take samples from the top of the water, from the side, from the scum gutters, from the bottom, to make sure that the pool is properly chlorinated and pH is properly maintained. There are other options here than people just going in randomly, maybe taking a test tube and taking some water out.
Well, like I said, I have a certified company that comes in weekly and does it also, and my men are around them, and their reports have to go to the Department of Health.
Yeah, the Department of Health, yeah.
Well, if we can't believe the certified water company and the Department of Health, then why would you
No,
believe us?
I'm saying there are better ways of doing it. And I think you should look into that.
Well, I think that's part of our investigation that we're asking the board to do. We're not saying we are automatically doing all of this, we're going to investigate it.
Well, having experience in this line, I would say there are better ways to maintain a public swimming pool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Furlong, West Rockville Township. I guess I'm concerned as well about the bus situation with your cameras. You're focusing on the children and students' behavior, and we just have an incident, it was in the paper this week, about the adult on the bus's behavior. So you're going to go to all the expense, you're going to install your cameras, you're going to get your SD cards. First of all, my question is, you're upgrading them to 32 No, 64. 64.